This is your before and after story. Southeastern College can help you prepare for a secure and fulfilling career in the growing healthcare field. We offer a wide range of careers to choose from, so whether you want to be a medical assistant, medical billing and coding specialist, nurse, surgical technologist, or another healthcare career, we've got you covered. Become a vital part of a healthcare team and make a real difference. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
Hey, warmer Fluffy Low! Welcome to Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. We're going to have a fun two-part chat today. We really didn't see a lot in terms of college basketball news and notes over the last 48 hours, so we're just going to have a nice long chat with Colby Dant. He does a tremendous job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We have to chat with him about what we're seeing with this Memphis situation, with them canning pretty much half their staff members. They canned 4 staff members over the last weekend and have canned 8 in total. Where do we stand with Memphis? What's going on with that situation? How do we view the entirety of the American? And we're also going to be talking about this as well. I know that something that is going to be coming up in our chat with Kobe is camaraderie on a team. I'm going to be talking about teams that go into the transfer portal, but they bring in guys via the portal for multiple years, and how that's going to work out this year for Gonzaga, even in the wake of the Steel Ventures news that he is going to be out for the season. So we're going to be touching upon that and so much more with Kobe. And this is a very interesting time of year in college basketball, and that now we are starting to get a little bit more set. These kids are now back on campus, so there's going to be more workouts. We should be getting more injury news in the next few weeks, and I want to do my best to be able to get you set for the upcoming college basketball season, because I'm sure that a lot of you were getting set for the upcoming football season. Now that it is here, you guys are having your bearings about you, and now I want to help you guys do the same for the college basketball season, as we've got about 55 days remaining, depending upon when you listen to this, for the upcoming college basketball season. So if you haven't done a lot of prep work yet, don't worry, you're still in fine shape, and I just need to know what you guys want to be hearing on this podcast. So if you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @Gino_D1. Keep in mind, letters M, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And you heard my WAC conference preview edition yesterday. We got all the low/mid-major conference previews already done, so we're going to be into the big boys, and you can expect probably about one a week, because now when you get into the Big 10, the Big 12, pretty much all these conferences other than the Big East, and I've yet to do the Atlantic 10 and the American. I lump those in with bigger conferences personally. Those are going to be a little bit more one a week, just because you do have bigger conferences, and if I were to knock them out all in about a week or so, well, we would have a lot of boring podcasts, so I'm going to be sprinkling those about as well. But always like to sprinkle in great guests like this man, Colby Dant, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love. But as we know, this time of year is college football season, and he does an absolutely tremendous job on that front as well. Colby is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to pretty much every football league on the face of planet Earth, a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all 364 D1 college basketball teams, and a man that you can follow on Twitter/X at the Colby D altogether. And Colby, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, man. Yeah, we got football started. What I love about that is, my heart's always with college football and college basketball, but when football starts, that basketball is just right around the corner.
Yep, absolutely. I am jonesing for it myself, and what else I'm sure that Memphis is jonesing for is for as much time as humanly possible before that season starts, because they canned 4 staffers over the past week, and that means that they have pretty much dismissed 8 different staff members here in the offseason. And just how do you take a look at this Memphis situation? Because with Penny Hardaway, there's no question that he's able to get better talent than a lot of other coaches will be able to at Memphis, but I wonder if, even though he's getting in that talent, if it's the best thing for Memphis, just because I feel like he's done less with more over the last few years, and just seeing this mass exodus with all the staffers tells you that there's a lot of people that disagree with what he's doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I like Penny Hardaway. I think for some of those things. His heart was in the right place, and some of it was, to me, the NCAA being ridiculous. But also, if these new allegations are true, where a guy got paid, never even played for them. But I mean, I still can't help but think that the NCAA picks and chooses their battles, back to the great Jerry Tarkanian statements of like, are you really believe this isn't happening elsewhere? I mean, now, as far as Penny's actual as a head coach, I have my question marks. I think you can draw parallels to Deion Sanders in football, where I really do believe like they're in it for the right reasons, but it just doesn't mean that you're going to be a good coach right away. If anything, you've seen it with college basketball, probably even more so than football. But a former player, whether it's Patrick Ewing at Georgetown or Clyde Drexler at Houston or Chris Mullen at St. John's, I get it. You were a fantastic basketball player. If anything, like I think Penny Hardaway was better than what people even realize. Like he was an incredible basketball player. But that doesn't mean you're just going to be very good at coaching. Another thing is, I do believe in continuity to a certain extent. Yes, you want to upgrade your team from an offensive, defensive point of view and, areas of weakness. But at the same time, can you maintain? To me, there's a sweet spot with both. I don't know that they've been achieving that. So I still have a lot of questions on the coaching front. Now, I will say this. He got a bad draw couple of those years in the NCAA tournament. Not every one of those years, but I did think one of those years, I think it was when they beat Boise, and then they got Gonzaga. Yeah, and they pushed them, and I can only wonder, had they got a better draw, maybe where would they have gone? Because I do think that team was very talented, but I have questions as far as the coaching front goes. And this turnover on the team, I'd be curious to know why everyone's fired, but I'm not a big Rick Stansbury fan. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but as far as basketball coaching, I was a skeptic when they brought him in, to tell you the truth. So we'll see. I wonder why you fire all of them right now. It kind of means to me that the NCAA might have some ammunition on perhaps them. I don't know, but it's going to be fascinating again to watch them. And I think one of the biggest things, and why I draw the comparison with Deion Sanders, is they weren't just former great players. Obviously, both were amazing players. But I think the thing they struggle with is keeping it consistently there. You saw, like to me, I'm an East Carolina fan. East Carolina basketball hasn't been relevant since Blue Edwards. We haven't made the NCAA tournament since 91. For East Carolina to have games where they've actually played Memphis well and almost won, that's crazy to me because I see Memphis's talent. So like Memphis would give Houston game when Houston was in the AAC, and you're saying, man, if they play like this throughout the rest of the conference, they are going to be, something like 25-5 or something. But that's not the case. You see them get bit. I think it was South Florida got them last year. So that to me has always been the thing. And I think Deion suffered from that too, is like you get up and beat TCU as a 21-point dog, but then the very next week you're getting worked by Washington State. That's something that I think they struggle with right now, drawing the comparisons. But maybe this can be a year. I do think there's something to be said of learning as you go, because he had never been a college basketball head coach before. You're constantly at a practice here, and maybe you can right that ship. We've seen it before historically with certain coaches and players where they were able to find their way after 4 or 5 losing seasons. I know Penny didn't have 4 or 5 losing seasons, but the expectations I don't think have been fulfilled in Memphis. So that would be my take on Penny. I want to see it work out, but I'm kind of with you where at this point, I think it's a make or break year. The way Memphis is spending money, the way they got the FedEx money, going through with their NIL collective and stuff. You wonder what if, you know what I mean? This was a program that was really good in the 80s. Obviously, Calipari had it rolling with Derrick Rose and everything. So you wonder if it could get back to those heights, perhaps with a different coach. And that's no disrespect to Penny Hardaway. You just wonder.
Yeah, I've got my big time question marks with Memphis because the talent has been there for them time and time again, and you're alluding to it. Who knows if that timeout actually gets called in that Florida Atlantic game, because I felt like whoever won that game was going to make a deep run in the tournament. Obviously, Florida Atlantic makes a Final Four. Who knows if that becomes Memphis, but if ifs were fifths, we would all be drunk. As joining me on the show, we've got Colby Dant, who does great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And additionally with that, I know that you love the American when it comes to college football, and I love it when it comes to college basketball as well, because when you look at Memphis on paper, they should be able to run this conference, in my opinion. But once again, I've got my question marks. I look at this American Conference as a whole, and I think that there's going to be a lot of pesky teams, with the main one that comes to mind for me being UAB, who brings back so much from a season ago. Certainly. I think UAB is a team to look out for, and I think the conference is getting better
Some of the teams that I think were dead weight, I think will be taking a step forward this year. That doesn't mean I think they're contenders, but I think a team like, UTSA, I think will be better this year. Tulane, I think will be better. I think ECU will be better this year. So that doesn't mean I think they're going to sniff the NCAA tournament or anything, but I just think night in, night out, if you don't have your stuff together, you could lose to some of these teams. I'm fascinated by seeing USF again this year. There's a slew of teams in the AAC that I think Temple's one. Last season was a wild ride if you were a Temple Owl fan because, they look so terrible. There's a gambling scandal. And then after that, they start covering every game. It was a wild ride there, but I'm intrigued. I was intrigued with their hire a year ago, and I think that they're a program to watch moving forward. Yes, you did lose UCF and, Houston and Cincinnati and stuff. And that was a lot of depth. Another thing is Wichita. Wichita is one I would be excited to see as well. Yeah, Penny's got to put that together. He brings in 8 transfers again this year, I think it is. The big one there was Tyrese Hunter, who's been everywhere now. And isn't that the best part about sport, though? Is you can load up with the roster. You can bring in the PJ Haggertys and the Tyrese Hunters, regardless of whatever the sport it is. Continuity does play a role. And that's why I'm a skeptic some with his approach, much like, comparing that to Dion was like, yes, I do believe getting talent is essential, but I also think continuity is essential too. And both need to kind of, and not to make this a football podcast, but Dabo Swinney refuses to use the portal. And you just can't help but think, man, if you got a couple of these guys, you have an area of weakness because we all know you have an area of weakness. So to address that, but yet at the same time, to not have everybody leave, to have a real culture within your locker room, it's going to be fascinating to watch again this year because there are teams that you can argue over the years have had deep runs with a lot of transfers on their team. So that's just my personal philosophy is I think if you look, UConn did a great job of it last year and the years prior to me of having some key transfers. Getting Cam Spencer was huge. Getting certain guys were huge, but at the same time, having a core, that's where I think probably mattered perhaps more than the transfers they brought in. So, and you saw it with Purdue. Purdue didn't really go out and go portal crazy. And years past, I think you could argue the same stuff too. So it remains to be seen, but I know that you can bring up, to play devil's advocate, you could say, hey, Oregon State made the Elite Eight with Wayne Tinkle, and they had a ton of transfers. And that's just the first one that pops in my brain. I know there's more of them. I'm fascinated by the AAC this year, and hopefully my East Carolina Pirates can catch this Memphis team on a night they're not expecting. So, yeah, we'll see.
Feel like East Carolina has been able to play some better basketball over the last few years. And to your point on that as well, looked no further than Kansas State when they made the Elite Eight 2 seasons ago. That was a new coach. That was a brand spanking new roster, and they looked absolutely tremendous. But I think this leads into something great for the second portion of our chat. Taking a look at these teams that they go into the transfer portal, but they maintain these guys for multiple years. I'm going to lead it off with Gonzaga since they lost Steel Venters, but at the same time, they're bringing back a lot of guys that were there last year, like Graham Ike is a guy that's back for season number 2 after they brought him in by the transfer portal, Ryan Nembhard as well, and we're going to be touching upon that and so much more on the flip side with Colby Dant right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast, being rejoined by our good friend Colby Dant, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network with the show The College Experience. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at @TheCobyD. And let's pick up right where we were leaving off with taking a look at these teams that they've done a nice job in terms of not just grabbing these guys in the transfer portal, but being able to keep them for multiple years. Like we're seeing with Gonzaga. They brought in Graham Ike last offseason. He's going to be back for season number 2. Ryan Nembhard, they brought him in last offseason. He's back as well, and they do lose Steel Venters. I think that that's a little bit of a loss, but it's not like Gonzaga was relying on Steel Venters last year because he was out, and Gonzaga, I think, is such a interesting team because they do take that loss, but even with that, I still feel like the depth that they brought in the backcourt, having a guy in Michael Ajayi that shot literally 50% from 3 last year, bringing in K-Leaf Battle, bringing back Dusty Stromer, if there's a team that can absorb that sort of loss, I do think that's Gonzaga.
Yeah, I mean, they're always fascinating to me. It sucks, by the way, for Steel Venters. I wish them the best. It's always terrible to have, let alone one injury, but then for it to follow up with another injury, I just think that's just bad luck. Hopefully, I don't know, he can get through all this and be even better. So we're all wishing that. But look, Gonzaga's a fascinating team to me. With Hickman and Nembhard at the guards, and then with bringing in, like you said, Khalif Battle, who I was high on a couple of years ago. I didn't think he was as good a season ago there at Arkansas, but we'll see if he can regain that form. And then Ike is a beast. They lost Watson, but this team should take a step forward this year. We'll see. The fact that their competition now, with BYU gone too, it feels like they're just going to run through that conference. Now, I know they have a Seattle game, I think it is, against Kentucky in the first, month or two of the season that I'm excited for. They have a couple of neutral site games that I'm excited for, but I think they're going to be potentially top 10 good. That's a step forward, because last year was a little bit of a step backwards in a way. Excited to see it, and maybe this could be their year, because I feel like some of those years we all thought they were going to do it, and I think there's a common thing amongst college basketball fans that they're good, but they're not elite. They haven't won that championship, which sometimes it's the years you're not expecting them to when they do cash that ticket, whether it's whoever that wins the national championship. So exciting times there in Spokane.
Yep, no question about it. And I think that they're a team that just embodies what you were talking about a little bit before, being able to maintain that chemistry and then utilizing the transfer portal. But I do think that that's a big point as well, having these guys return for season number 2 of the portal as well, because you were talking about it with UConn. I thought it was so big that they had Tristan Newton back for season number 2. I think that that's what goes a little bit under the radar, because when it comes to utilizing the transfer portal, I think a big key for a lot of these teams is not just to have a one-year rental, which obviously you can have a few and have quite a bit of success with it. We saw Cam Spencer be that missing cog for UConn to really be super dominant last season. But I do think that going out in the transfer portal, you shouldn't just be having a bunch of one-year rentals, but you should be looking at some of these guys being like, okay, it didn't pan out at this school, but season number 2, season number 3 in our system, we can allow him to grow and develop.
That is huge. I'm glad you touched on that. But by the way, I'm still mad that Tristan Newton left East Carolina for UConn. Salt in the wounds there. But no, you're right, man. And this is something that I think is bigger than basketball. I think this is baseball, football, basketball, all those sports. It's normally the second year, it seems like to me that first year, the transfers can work out, but the second year they take this gigantic step. I wish I had numbers to document this as proof to say this percentage of athlete at the D1 level really benefits from the second year, but it's all subjective. What would that be? But I just really agree with your point. And I know that we could say Tristan Newton. I know there's other examples we could say, but I believe that's correct. I really do believe the second year in the system, you came in, you were the new guy. You were the one learning what everything is like, from your teammates to your coaches to the offense and defensive philosophies. Now you have expectations. You know what it's like, and now you can be the man there and take that step forward. Sometimes being comfortable in general, as just someone that just, has switched schools a lot when I was in middle school and high school, was like, it takes a minute to get comfortable. I'm not even talking about sports either. I'm talking about just with personal relationships. So I think you're right there. And I think that's something that is undersold in today's market as far as analysts talking college football, college basketball, college baseball, that the portal really does matter. And I bet you probably even pro too. We just don't talk about it enough.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I do think that is big in the pro game as well. Look no further than at the NBA landscape. A lot of these teams that have been homegrown, they have been the teams that have been winning the titles in recent years as well. And when it comes to just taking a look at the game of college basketball, Colby, I know you're hard at work, and I know that you and Ryan McIntyre have been doing a great job with your coaches spotlight as well. You guys have been bringing on a lot of college coaches, being able to chat with them, and just in your chats with some of these coaches, have there been a few teams, have there been just a few things in general that you've been able to take away from some of those chats, and perhaps a team or two that now you're feeling a little bit more bullish/bearish on, now that you've had a chance to be able to talk with the men that are running those teams in person?
Oh, man, this is slippery territory, as I've learned doing our show for years. When we just started out, we weren't getting any coaches on, 7-8 years ago. And one of the things I learned is that you end up developing these rapports with these coaches because they're good people and they're human like you, and they're going to tell you it could really be slippery. A perfect example would be, and this is a football one, but Troy Calhoun, like a year ago, convinced me his team was horrible. I came back to, from that interview saying that's Air Force's football coach. I know, like I said, I'm throwing a lot of football into basketball, and my apologies if you're just strictly a college basketball fan. But my point is that watch out. Sometimes that information you get, you got to come back. One of the things I try to do is try to differentiate my personality on air with my actual expectations from their teams. So I try, even though I'll tell you certain things when you listen to these coaches, yes, you can buy into this team is going to be a lot better this year. But then I'm like, okay, well, don't look too much into it because I've gotten gassed before, So I would say though, like some of the ones that I've been paying attention to as far as teams that I'm excited for. I mean, some of the smaller schools, I hate to talk about my favorite team, but I am encouraged about East Carolina this year. That's one though that maybe it's my optimism as a fan, but I think just year 3 of the Schwartz era, I look forward to it. They were a team that, in a similar vein, though, they have gotten hit in the portal a lot over the past couple of years. Whether it's Tristan Newton, who was the previous regime, that's one that I think I feel better about after speaking to the coaches there. That I'm like, okay, the Pirates. This is the year that I think we can. I don't want to say make the NCAA tournament, but we can have a good season and be a tough out for every team on our schedule in conference. That is one where talking to them, because I was kind of uncertain with some of the guys that left in the portal. I thought, man, if we had just retained these guys, we would have a pretty good team this year. After talking to the coaches, I do believe we're in a good spot. So ECU would be one. As far as like major teams, I've looked at a few in the Power 5 or Power 6 that you would say. These ones I haven't even actually talked to, but it's been more so talking to other people around college basketball. And one that has really caught my eye is the Xavier Musketeers there in Cincinnati. I'm really excited to see this year. And such bad injury luck, really, over the past couple of years, in my opinion, that I think if everyone, knock on wood here, stays healthy, I'm very excited to see how the Musketeers will do in the Big East this year and just in general in college basketball, because the more you talk to people that have somewhat seen practices or been affiliated with the program or maybe just hardcore fans, the more you buy into them being a really good team in the Big East. So that's one that just the other day I was circling saying, interesting. Okay. I hope that answers your question, because I'll be honest though, Greg, like getting off the phone with some of these coaches, you sit there and say, oh, this team's going to be fantastic. And I'm like, but every coach is going to tell you that. In a way, it's their job to tell you that. So you do have to take it with a grain of salt. But also one thing that is getting better too is you're seeing some of the schedules. Getting the schedules now, this is now in early September. Getting the schedules, you can kind of forecast, okay, well, this team's doing this team is doing that. And then I think it makes projecting a little easier.
Yep, I think so as well. And I think that we're in for a lot of interesting teams that can be able to ascend/decline this season. And a man that is always doing great work, a man that is always ascending, is you, Colby. You do great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network with the college experience, and you cover a little bit of everything. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Certainly, the college basketball experience on Twitter at TCE on SGPN. And I also host the college football experience and college baseball experience and the FCS college football experience. And we even do a Frozen 4 podcast when that comes around. Anything college sports related, that we love it. When the college basketball season goes live, we're live every single night of the season. But even right now, we're previewing every conference, talking to coaches and trying to make our projections, which I'm sure will all be thrown into the fireplace at some point. That's why college basketball is the greatest. You'll see Chicago State turn it around overnight. Well, somewhat. Can't wait for the season. You can follow me on Twitter at TheColbyD, but youtube.com/The College Experience is kind of the hub for all of our stuff. You can watch our shows. I believe the viewing product is better than the listening product, but if you're going to listen to us, we're out there too. iTunes, Spotify. Appreciate you, Greg. And look, man, we are close. I know John Rothstein's tweeting this out every day. T-minus, so-and-so days to the season tips. But man, I can feel it right around the corner. We're starting to do our conference previews, and it's just got me super excited. Got the tail wagging like a German shepherd there. Can't wait for the season.
Yep, me too. We are getting closer and closer. Colby is jonesing up for it. I am as well. And my goodness, this is going to be a tremendous season. A big thanks to Colby for joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Junin_D1. Keep in mind, literacy, naming does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Have a few conference previews remaining, and then once we do those, we're going to be set for what is going to be such a tremendous college basketball season. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.